Spike fans. This is Dr. Don Four here to talk to you about your research proposal, provide an overview for the course that you're about to begin. So kick back, relax, and I'm going to take you through exactly what you're going to accomplish this term. Okay, what you need to think about right away, things that you need to get into your mind early in the term, is you need to decide a research topic. Research topic needs to be in your field. It needs to be related to what you're studying in the degree program, and it needs to be relevant, something that will add knowledge to the field. You need to decide on the variables that you're going to study. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about that, but basically, if you were studying job satisfaction and organizational commitment in the tourist industry, then your research variables would be job satisfaction, organizational commitment, and the tourist industry. So we're going to talk a lot about that as we go through, but you need to be thinking about that. You need to be thinking about research questions. The best way I can describe a research question is you're sitting around the workplace and you think, wow, motivation doesn't seem to be where it should be. I wonder why. And that develops a research question, something that you can test. You need to be thinking about your hypothesis. Your hypothesis basically takes your research question and puts it into a measurable form. And then you need to be thinking about the format that you're going to put it in. That's going to be easy because I'm going to give you examples. And as we go through, I'm going to give you constant examples to help you out. And then you need to be thinking about your program objectives, program outcomes, because you're going to have to tie your program outcomes to your research. And there's probably a few other things that you need to be thinking about. But you're kind of like this guy on the bicycle who you're pedaling really fast and probably not thinking about a whole lot now, except for it's the first day of class and you've got to get through this project. So kick back, relax, and I'll take you through and kind of show you what I'm talking about. This is what a research paper looks like, a typical research model. You'll see it divided up. Sometimes they'll split the methodology in half, and sometimes they'll split the problem or issue statement in half and make it 7 paragraphs. But typically, a research paper or thesis, dissertation is 5 chapters, okay? And so the proposal is constituted by the first 3 chapters, or identify the problem or issue, create a good literature review, and then select the methodology. And then to round out your paper, you do an analysis, conclusions, and recommendations for future research. Those are completed normally in the capstone class as it is for this program. And references. References are so important. APA, we use APA format. If you don't have an APA book, you should get one. But there's also an awful lot of help for you on the web and through the local library and your university library that will help you. There's 2 types of research that you need to be concerned with in this research course. Primary research, which is research you do yourself. And if you're going to use human subjects in your research, that means that if you're going to survey people or test people or do anything with people, then you have to get IRB approval. So don't forget that. And then there's secondary research, which is something someone else did, and you can use that. A lot of you will use secondary research because you'll use data from the NTSB or data from other sources that would be secondary research because you didn't collect it yourself. But it's still very important that you understand everything about how that data was collected. So the first chapter of your paper is to identify the problem or issue. It doesn't have to be a problem. Don't go into this thinking, I've got to find a problem, because you don't necessarily have to. It can just be an issue, like the motivation issue. There may not be any problem at all, but once a year you want to check motivation in your organization. You may wonder about runway incursions. Are they affecting your airport? Or safety of batteries being brought onto the plane. These are issues that you might come up with for your topic, and they can be issues. They don't have to necessarily be a problem. The research problem, and I should have problem/issues, identify the issue you plan to research, why is it important, and provide details, okay? Identifying your project is going to be on you. It needs to be something you're passionate about. It needs to be something in your field of study. It needs to be something that will help you get through this program, and you'll feel good about it when you finish, okay? Now, you also are going to have to cover your program outcomes. If you're an MAS student, I've got all those listed. If you belong to another program, which we occasionally get a few students from another program, then we'll need to look at your program for program outcomes. But you need to identify which program outcomes pertain to the research topic you've chosen. In the MAS, you have to do the first core program outcomes. And then there's 8 more that you choose 1 or 2, depending on the study. And all these things we'll be talking about a lot throughout the course. Here's some topics that other students in the past have chosen. Improving NTSB investigation procedures, the integrity of third-party investigating, aircraft crew resource management effectiveness, safety and possible future composites, blinded by the light, measuring the intensity of laser hazards to aviation. So these topics are all important to the field, and they lend to helping the field of study, increasing the aircraft arrival rate at non-towered airports. I believe this was a student in Alaska. Improving the national air transportation system with next-gen. A lot of these areas are new. Composites. A lot of students look at composites. It's new to the field, and it's definitely something that needs to be looked at. I had a student not too long ago look at the LED lighting versus the incandescent lighting. All airports are changing, but kind of wondering how does that affect the pilot? Great topic. Okay, so these are some ideas. This is what your proposal will look like right here. You start out with Chapter 1, problem or issue statement, overview of the problem or issue, the purpose of your research, the scope, the research question or questions, the hypothesis or hypotheses, the variables you plan to study, and then the program outcomes that you plan to approach. That's first 4 if you're MAS, and 1 to 2 of the remaining 8, depending on the topic you've chosen. Chapter 2 is an extensive literature review. The idea behind the literature review is for you to find out everything that's been studied. You want to see who's looked at what you're looking at before. And we'll talk a lot about that. There's a lot of lectures on each one of these different areas. Okay. Your literature must support your research question and your hypothesis. Should be definitely peer-reviewed articles. Come from referee journals, and must be usually empirical articles. So then the third chapter that you'll do in the proposal is the methodology. This is where you assume that the reader does not know anything, and you tell them everything you're going to do. You talk about your test instrument. You talk about your control group. You talk about any assumptions or issues. You talk about how you're going to test your program outcomes. So this is what Chapter 1 will look like. What should a problem statement include? The background of the problem, the variables to be researched, the proposed hypothesis, all these things. Okay. A research question is basically you're wondering out loud about what it is that you're planning to study. This is an example of a research question. How does technological acceptance affect employee attitudes toward job satisfaction? How does technological acceptance affect attitudes toward organizational commitment? Those are 2 research question examples, just random. Then you have to select your hypothesis. The hypothesis makes the research question measurable. Leader-member exchange is related to job satisfaction. Leader-member exchange is related to org commitment. Job satisfaction related to org commitment. Those are basic hypotheses. This is another. An individual's acceptance of technological change is positively related to their satisfaction with the job. Another basic hypothesis. You get by with that, but it does guide the direction of the study, identifies facts that are relevant, suggests which form the research design is appropriate, and provides a framework. So that hypothesis might only be a sentence, but it's a very powerful sentence. Must be adequate for its purpose, must be testable, and must be better than any of its rivals. These are a little bit better examples of research questions and hypothesis, and I'll use this slide a lot. So to what extent does job satisfaction affect retention among employees in small corporate organizations? At least 80% of employees who have worked for the company for more than 10 years are more satisfied than those who worked for less than 5 years. See, that's very specific. So you have some flexibility with your hypothesis. The point is, it needs to be testable. It needs to, your research question, your hypothesis, your literature review should all blend together and reflect in your methodology of how you plan to test your topic. So, conceptual framework is relatively new in academia. A picture is worth 1,000 words. You're not required to have a conceptual framework, but if you use one, it makes a big difference in the reader being able to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. Here's an example, acceptance of technological change. Perceived usefulness, perceived ease of use, applied to behavioral intentions and use behavior. And below it, you would explain what that means, and it really helps the reader understand. So not required, but nice touch. Here's a chart, actually a table, and these are nice touches also. To have a table, don't overdo it with tables. Make sure they're APA formatted, but here's the construct or variables. You'll hear that word interchanged. Perceived usefulness, perceived ease to use, and it explains how each area is measured in your paper. Okay, this is a great chart to have in your methodology. So you select your variables. You need independent variables. You can have quite a few of those, but only one dependent variable and a moderating variable. Okay, dependent variables are ones explained by the researcher. Independent variables are controlled by the environment and influence results. Okay, and then a moderating variable breaks it down into sex, race, class. Kind of adds a little bit of variety to it. Okay, so an independent variable is a presumed cause. Dependent variables are the presumed effect. And again, we've got lessons on each one of these different areas. I'm giving you a quick overview. I'm not trying to teach the topic with each one of these. Then you have your prior research or literature review. Literature review sections examines recent or historically significant research studies, company data, or industry reports that act as a basis for your proposed study. Basically, you've got a topic, you decided what you want to study, and you want to see what someone else has done in the same area, not necessarily the same control group or even the same industry, but someone who's looked at the variables that you plan to look at and the organization and what have they done. You learn so much from the literature as you're reading it. It helps you identify the framework that you want to use for your paper. You'll think that you know exactly where you're going, then all of a sudden you'll read a literature paper, a peer-reviewed journal article, and you'll think, wow, I like what they did. They laid it out perfect. You can never, ever, ever use someone else's words, but the framework you can use. So if they've got a method of measurement and a framework for the research study that fits what you're using, what you're wanting to do, by all means, don't be afraid to use it. Okay. This is kind of a quick literature example. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. We will spend plenty of time in that area in week 4. But this is where you're looking at the studies in your area of that you're studying, and kind of paraphrasing, putting into words what they said about your topic and how they approached it. You also want to find the best literature. We'll talk a lot about that, finding the seminal thinkers. In this area, Cheeseborough and a couple of these other folks are known. When you start seeing the same name cited in the literature of the papers you're reading, you know that researchers are paying attention to those folks. So the methodology then is where you tell everything you're going to do to test your topic. Describe all aspects of how you will conduct your research. Talk about the survey, talk about the historical data, the analysis for quality control, whatever it is that you're planning to use. Analyze contingency files, conduct interviews, conduct time study, whatever you decide to do, talk about it. Explain how you're going to do it. Talk about the demographics of your control group. Talk about when you plan to do it, how you plan to do it, what's it going to look like, what is it going to measure. And understand, you may not know all of this because this paper might be coming to you as you move along. Do the best you can. What you do know, put into paper, okay? And talk about how you're going to analyze. Are you going to use a histogram, crosstab, quality control checks, a t-test, regression? What do you think that will analyze your paper best? It'll help a lot if you've been through the statistics class, but there's still a lot you can put in methodology. And then you do the analysis, the conclusions for of your findings, and then the references, and that's what we have. So during this class, on week 3, you're going to give me a draft chapter 1. I'm going to give you back really good feedback. You'll make corrections, and you'll have chapter 1 finished. Then week 5, chapter 2, which is literature review, you'll submit it. I'll give you comments. You'll make corrections. You'll have chapter 2 done. Same for chapter 3. By the time we get to the end of the course, you should have a perfect proposal ready to go. And then quoting old Peter Drucker, there's absolutely nothing as useless as doing something with great efficiency that does not need to be done at all. So think hard about your research topic and you'll do well. Now, real fast, I want to take you I have an example that I will post, but this is what your paper is going to look like. This particular person who gave me permission to use this was looking at pilot fatigue, examination of flight time, rest periods, and pilot burnout. Now, I don't profess that this is a perfect example, but it's a good example. And so, you can take this, your front page. See, all through this course, we're going to emphasize APA formatting. But if you look at this, if you just follow what this particular person did, then you can worry about other things because the APA is going to be there. There's a table of contents. There's an abstract, the keywords, and then he has an introduction with an overview, purpose of the study, the scope of the study, and then the research questions, a little bit about the research questions, and then he has his general research question right here. And he has 2 hypotheses, and he chose to do this in a positive and a null hypothesis. So you can do that. You can do just a positive. You can do just a null if you want to. That's going to be kind of up to you. And then here's the variables that he plans to discuss and benefits of the study. He threw that in. That doesn't have to be there, but that's fine. And program outcomes. Then you're going to list the program out on chapter 1. You only list the program outcomes that you are going to address. So he's going to address, he's an MAS student, program outcome 1, 2, 3, and 4. And he's chosen only one of the final 8, number 10. And he did that based on what fits his research topic. And so the literature review, something I like, and this student did, is a quick paragraph on what you're going to do in the literature review. And then he starts talking about, he starts addressing his variables through the literature review. Talks about operation tempo. He finds articles that talk about human factors consideration. He goes through, finds articles on fatigue countermeasures, and then he jumps into chapter 3, the methodology. So, and when I say this is not perfect, I would say in my comments back to him, I said you need more literature, and that's going to be because 3 pages of literature is probably not enough for your proposal. And then the methodology, quick paragraph. I like that when you have kind of a lead-in paragraph of what you're trying to do. Then he talks about the research type. He has a definition of terms, and then he gets into how he's going to collect his data, and goes into talking about the different methods of data collection. He has these assumptions and limitations. He has other study limitations. Talks about data analysis. And then he addresses his program outcomes. He lists program outcome 1, and then he talks about how his research will address program outcome 1. He lists program outcome 2. You just cut and paste that from the first chapter, and then he talks about how he's going to score. And there's nothing wrong with you saying there are things that won't be studied in here, because each one of these program outcomes might list 5 or 6 things. And if you're not studying it, just say it. You're not studying it. Don't think you have to address everything, even if it doesn't fit in your study. Then he lists program outcome number 10 and talks about how he's going to. And then here's the references in APA format. Okay, so this is a good example, not a perfect example, but this is Dr. Don Four. I'm looking forward to working with you this term, and I look forward to meeting and talking to each and every one of you. So good luck with your proposal. I'll see you in cyberspace.